Today is Thursday, the 17th of April, 2025, and I'm reading The Invisible Way, A Time to Love, A Time to Die. This is a book by Reshad Feild, and it was published in 1979. I'm here in chapter 9 now. He was in Turkey, he's back in England, and he has met Nur through Elizabeth. They are now visiting John, who is an old friend of Elizabeth's, and he is ill. He has got cancer. Chapter 9. When we saw John later that morning, he was very grey and seemed weak. Fordy wheeled him about and finally brought him out onto the veranda. The rain had gone, leaving all the promise of a beautiful spring day. It was warm in the sunlight, and John was comfortable with just a light blanket around his shoulders. "I love it out here," he said. "I find it easier to meditate in the open air. It's a paradox, for I contemplate on the permanence of truth in the presence of all the beauty of the perishable. Sitting here and watching the seasons change year after year. But perhaps it is also possible to see it here. After all, what did Blake say? To see eternity in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower. It's harder when you are young to live with that degree of passion, just as it is harder to live in certain other ways when you are old. Anyway," he went on, "this morning I felt it was time to talk to you about certain things. So try to listen carefully." "But John," I ventured, "Fordy says that you are not well today, and we don't want to exhaust you." No, he interrupted. "It is my pleasure to have you here. All I want to do is to complete our conversation of last night. About the cancer, I mean. Probably because I was to some degree locked in that moment of fear when the old woman shook her fist in fury at my lack of will. Or for some reason I do not know. A growth developed on the left side of my chest and spread through into my shoulder, sometimes immobilizing most of my left arm. It is not a pleasant sight, but that shouldn't bother us either. The doctors took tests and over a period of years did their best with operations, chemotherapy, the lot. I think I always knew that it was hopeless. It was my destiny, if you like, and so I did my best not to miss a breath. By the time this old body collapsed, I want there to be nothing but love, no anger or hate, no resentment or bitterness, and most of all, no regrets. I wished to spend the rest of my life being grateful for being alive. You know," he continued, "we stand continuously between what we call life and what we call death. For those who find a reality in chasing after endless physical pleasures, wealth and possession, the very thought of the death of the physical body is put so far back into the subconscious that they miss the chance of being free in life. They smother the possibility of freedom by surrounding themselves in more and more protection in the forms of the physical world. If children were only brought up with the joy that lies in the challenge of life, there would be much less fear in the world, and more people would live in the present. We can overcome death. Joy can be as infectious as the disease that end the physical lifespan. It is fear and guilt that block the avenue to true freedom." "These are tremendously high ideals, John," I said, "and not many people come to the depth of understanding that you have." John smiled. "Perhaps not," he replied, "but if you consider, both of you, your own personal search and the yearning behind it, is it just by chance that you have met up with circumstances that led you there and here? You must know by now that there is no such thing as chance. The trouble is that you take experience for granted, and do not see that each experience is a stepping stone towards freedom. If you could only accept whatever comes in gratefulness. Think about it, John said, turning to me. Haven't you wanted to know about sex? Haven't you wanted to know about the inner meaning of birth and of death? Come on now, if you hadn't had the inner yearning, you wouldn't be in this situation now. After all, look at it. You have Noor. Who may become your partner in life, and through whom you might gain some knowledge of what lies behind the act of sex and of birth. And now you're both here with me. Can you see, after all these years, that everything is provided as soon as we ask the question? Jesus said, "Seek and you shall find." Do you remember? Just that moment the telephone rang. I felt a great sense of relief as I went to answer it. It was a woman's voice on the line. "My name is Margaret," she said. "You must be John's friend. Welcome to Wales. John has told me all sorts of nice things about you both, and I hope that you will come over for tea and see the garden. But how is John? I had a strange dream about him and had to call." "Who is it?" shouted John from the veranda. "It is Margaret," I said. "She's asking how you are. Tell her I'm fine and that I'm being looked after very well, and tell her that she worries too much." I found Margaret laugh on the other end of the phone. "He's incorrigible," she said, "but I'm happy to hear that he's okay. Anyway, please do come and see me, or perhaps I'll pop by later today or tomorrow." She rang off and I heard the click of the receiver being put down. "Who was that?" I asked John after I had sat down again. "That was Margaret, a very good old friend of mine," he explained. "She is involved with all manner of healing, and perhaps you will have a chance to meet later. But for the time being, I want to continue our conversation without being sidetracked. Please, get me a glass of sherry from the dining room, will you? And have yourself one," he called after us. "Then we can go on." There was something inexorable in the way that John spoke to us that morning. However tired he was, I noticed on more than one occasion a sense of agitation in his voice as he tried to explain certain points. He would lean forward in his chair, staring deeply at one of us to make a point clear, or would wave his pipe frustratedly in the air if we were not paying sufficient attention. Both of us realized that he was attempting to transmit ideas that, in many ways, were far beyond us to understand at the time. "As I told you," he continued, "I had a letter from Elizabeth, who in turn had received a letter from your teacher in Turkey. I also had a very long conversation on the telephone with her just before you arrived. We discussed many things, mainly to do with what it seems you both wanted to understand at this time. But now, perhaps, we can go a little further. Have either of you ever considered that ideas alone can change a human being? The transmission of ideas comes from a higher world than the one that we experience with the senses or even touch on with a rational mind. The world of ideas is a world on its own, linking up with us only when we agree to it and work with it in a special way." He stopped for a moment to watch us. "Many of the things I wish to give you will be new," he explained. "Others will be familiar. But either way, it is important to listen as though for the first time. Otherwise, your mind will try to compare, and the result will be limited." "I understand what you are saying, John," Noor replied. "There was a time when I could see that other world. Each idea was a shape that could be understood, rather than seen with the eyes. There even seemed to be a hierarchy of shape and an ordered system to it all. Is that right?" "Yes, in a way. But not everyone has the same experiences as you, and for our conversation to work, we will have to keep pace with each other. The way to approach this is to look into the meaning of the word conscious. People bandy this word around a great deal, but few have the slightest idea of its real meaning. We can say, for instance, the word sex, and it would not be hard to conjure up a variety of descriptions relating to the word. But if we were to say conscious sex, or conscious birth, or conscious death, we would have added a whole new dimension to things. Language is such an important subject. It is meant to be a means of communication, not merely a tool for intellectual reasoning. Language was never intended to feed the gossiping mind, but rather was meant to be understood as a vast pattern system, each language producing different patterns in order to communicate ideas across time and space. All right then, let us return to the word conscious. According to some dictionaries, it means being awake to the moment or sharing another's knowledge of awareness. But that doesn't seem a sufficient explanation as far as I am concerned. It is true that to be conscious, we have to be awake. And it is also true to say that most of our lives we can notice, if we are quite honest with ourselves, that we are unconscious and thus asleep. As G.I. Gurdjieff said so often, we are sleepwalkers. If we give you a big nudge in the ribs, he said to me, puffing so hard at his pipe that smoke billowed from the bowl, would you be able to say at this precise moment that you were awake? Be honest with me. Noor smiled. You know, she said, I just happened to be watching you when John spoke. You had the most extraordinary glazed look in your eyes. It was quite true. I really was somewhere else. I had heard the words that John was speaking, but most certainly they had not sunk in. I could hear them still floating around somewhere, as it were, but there was so much in what he was saying that it was hard to listen with sufficient attention. It is the mind again, John said. Either you were trying to compare one idea with another, which cannot work, or you were sensing that you were not capable of understanding. The last would be ridiculous, since I would not talk about these things if I did not know that both of you could understand, and that the ideas would continue to grow in you over many years. Let's go back to this point of being awake. Our recognition that we are asleep, unawake, and thus unconscious of what is really going on serves as an impetus for us to begin to find out what it could mean to be truly conscious, living human beings, not half-human creatures swayed by every outside force, everyone else's moods, and even the changes in the weather. Thus, if we could be completely conscious at the time of birth, life could be seen quite differently, couldn't it? We've all heard about the natural childbirth movement. Well, personally, I don't like the expression, for it's not childbirth perfectly natural in the first place. It is true that through drugs and so on, we have made it very unnatural. But just because a woman does not take drugs and has her baby at home does not mean to say that either she or her husband are actually conscious. To be conscious is a very high state indeed, and needs much work to come to the realization of the true meaning of the word. If the parents were really conscious, they would be participating in the creation of space for the manifestation of eternal recurrence. Now that might take some considering, John said, laughing. Do you think that space just happens on its own and human beings have little or nothing to do with it? That subject alone could make a book. However, I did say I would give you ideas, not books. But look at it quite simply. when you construct a building, you are working with space, are you not? In the same way, if you visualize a shape, you are also involved with creating space. Now imagine what the understanding of this could mean when it comes to conscious birth. A whole world opens up. If the child that is born knows without any shadow of a doubt that he or she is loved, and that both the physical and psychic space into which it is born is in conscious order, then we have gone a long way to helping that being come into the world. Once again, we have to look at the idea that being awake is a prerequisite to being conscious, and that since the future of our planet lies in the hand of the children, it is really our obligation to be conscious at the moment of birth, whether it be our own children, ourselves, or the world that is coming into being anew with each breath. All this requires real effort on our part. It just doesn't happen on its own. Do you see what I'm getting at? I was about to say something when John closed his eyes and took a long, slow, deep breath. The air became still, and I was aware of sounds I had not heard before. I heard the bees calling in the valley, the wind rustling the leaves, a dog barking in the distance, and a faint sound of some children playing. It seemed that I could hear them all at once. It was an extraordinary experience, for I realized at that moment that normally it only appears that we hear or see more than one thing at a time. Perhaps for a brief moment I knew the meaning of consciousness as a form of energy, for it was possible to realize that all the sounds were taking different lengths of time to reach my ears, and thus to hear them all at once it was necessary to transcend space and time as we normally perceive it. In the same way, what we appear to see is already gone. The light of the sun takes 8 minutes to reach us. So when we look at the sun, we are seeing it where it was 8 minutes before. We see light from stars that no longer exist. Even a leaf is not the same as it appears to be, because it has already changed by the time it reaches our perception. It is merely a memory pattern. John opened his eyes and continued to breathe deeply. "You had a taste," he said. "Never think, my friend. Instead, use thought. It is a form of energy, and it will serve you and open your eyes to many things." I was in such a state that I wondered if I could listen to much more. I realized that I had taken a step in that experience, and that I could not return to my previous state. To be conscious had become both an overwhelming desire and a necessity. "Where was I?" John said, questioning himself good-naturedly. "Oh yes, this business about being conscious. I'm only going to give you 1 or 2 more ideas so that you don't get indigestion. These you can mull over, and perhaps we will have time to talk more about them later. We've touched on the notion of conscious birth, but what about conscious sex? However odd this may sound, it is very much harder than we might imagine. If you think about it, most people go to sleep the moment they make love. Forgive me if that sounds outrageous, but it's true. Women are sometimes more aware of this than men, aren't they, Noor?" he said. "Sex is considered to be the most sacred act on earth, and thus should be treated accordingly. At the very least, we are asked to be conscious in making love. That means that we have to be awake, and in a similar state to that which you have just experienced. Thus, preparation is necessary on all levels, from physical cleanliness to the higher levels of breath and discipline of the mind. If we are awake and conscious of the divine, which provides everything for our sex, can become sacred. It is not given for the procreation of the species alone, nor is it just for release. Conscious sex transforms energies, and since God made us in his image, we have much to explore here. As I said, you can consider these ideas and deepen your understanding of them throughout the years. Once the seeds have been sown, there is the chance of real understanding. I stop this here.